find out about Not Your Ordinary Mom from McLean Brossman.
I want to talk to you about my mother, that is about 5'1". She's a true Southern woman in all the grace and all the manners, and if you push her too far, in all the canines that come out to show you shouldn't have gone that far. One of the things that recently occurred that got me to reflect on my mother's life and how I realized as an adult she is not your ordinary mother. It was a number of years ago when my father was in the hospital. The caregiver was there with my mother sitting in the chair, my father in the hospital, and they wanted something to eat. So she went down and got some food for them in the snack bar area. When she came back, she found out that while she was gone, my mother had started to nod off, and my father had looked at her and said, "Why don't you just lay down in that empty bed over there?" It makes sense, but if anyone understands hospitals, that's a cardinal sin. That's a sterile bed for someone else, and if you lay on it, they have to redo the whole thing. Well, the nurse came in, and she started scolding my mother for her and got her out of it. Then, before the caregiver got back, the nurse decided to come back and scold her a second time. Well, this led to a phone call that I got describing it, where the caregiver in this wonderful Grenada accent said, "Your mother slapped a nurse." And I said, "Okay, what happened?" She said, "The woman was speaking very condescending to her and she slapped her." "All right, who do I need to talk to?" Well, then I got a call right after that from the head of the customer service in the hospital, who then contacted me and said, "I've been told you're the power of attorney," and started chewing me out for it. She just laid into me. And I said, "Look, I'm the son, I'm only child, I'm responsible, I apologize. Is there anyone else I need to apologize? Wasn't okay my mother slapped a nurse." She wouldn't stop. She just kept laying into me. And then I said, let me get something straight. If you don't want to stop chewing me out for this and won't work with me on a solution, I'm glad to go to the Washington Post in D.C., that's where they were, and let them know that a 5'1" woman with wonderful Southern grace is a major threat to Sibley Hospital. She got quiet at that moment and started working with me. Well, anyway, the long story short of this is typical of many stories, in that she said, "Well, you know, your mother will have to have a police escort to come in to see your father." Well, I almost burst out laughing because I knew how this was going to work out. So I get a call the next time my mother comes to Sibley, and I ask the caregiver, and I say, "Bridget, how'd it go with Mom?" And Bridget can barely contain herself and not laughing. She said, "There your mother was, walking down the hall, in arm with a young police officer, escorting her to your dad, and I told her what you told me to tell her, which was she was so important that from now on she's supposed to get an escort." But you don't realize this is just one of many stories of my whole life. My mother was an activist for those who didn't have a voice. She probably had played an active role in child labor laws and even in the civil rights work. And I want to add a few of those stories on to let you know who my mother really is and how she had a very important role in my life. You see, in college, she was in college in North Carolina, and she got to earn the right to come to Raleigh when they were out of office. And they had kind of like the JCs where they role played and they were able to pretend they were representatives. And she proposed that they should remove the law that required African Americans to sit at the back of the bus. Well, what's interesting is that got into the Greensboro paper. and the Ku Klux Klan burned a cross on the president of the school's front yard. And she almost was thrown out of school. Well, what I didn't realize is most mothers weren't like that until later in life. But she tells it as a story of how afraid she was and how worried she was that she'd be thrown out of school. But what's interesting is how not only did it not stop her, she also told me that the person who proposed the law later, the actual removing of the law, wrote her and told her how brave that was. And then 10 years later, proposed removing of that particular law that actually was then removed. Her career was in child labor laws, and I found out that she was appalled by the abuse of children in work environments. And she got them to produce a newsletter, and the newsletter was sent to the congressman with pictures of abused children. You don't realize this didn't happen before her. Sending newsletters with abused children to congressmen was not something they did. So she got the Labor Department to do that, which ultimately led, in my view, directly to the child labor laws we have today. So what I want to tell you is how honored I am and how much you can tell, if you get to know me better, that my mother played an active role. In fact, in my life, in my development, one time in IBM when I was trying to change IBM, she said, "Where did you learn this? You could get fired." I said, "From you, Mom." That's where I learned it, to stand up and truly speak truth to power. So I wanted to introduce my mom to you today and hope to get to tell you many more stories like this in the future. Thank you very much.